Hi everybody, thank you so much for attending. We'll give you a minute just to get yourself settled in and decide whether you're going to put your camera or not on this lovely cloudy Friday afternoon. But it's cloudy here in North Wales, which is where I'm based anyway. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name's Sue Williams. I'm here representing the PPMA board today just to say thank you for your ongoing support. I am going to hand over with no further ado to Andy Collins from Restless, who is going to take you through a really pertinent subject area this afternoon. We have only got you for half an hour, but Andy's got some slides he's going to take through with you. I think he's happy to take questions throughout the session, and hopefully we'll have a couple of minutes at the end as well to take some questions from you on how to better understand the over 50s, which as an over 50 person, I'm very much looking forward to some insight on that. We have got a chat box on the go and we will be monitoring that if you use it. And this session is recorded, but it will be anonymized. So it's only the main content that will be recorded. And obviously that means that you can then share it and spread the word with your colleagues. So with no further ado, I will hand over to Andy. Thank you so much for supporting us this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sue. Nice to see you all. I recognise some faces and some names, so it's good to be back supporting PPMA. My beard seems to grow every time I see you all. So, but it's good to see you, and I'm glad it's Friday because I'm ready for a weekend. So, things I share with you today will be. I'm trying not to do death by PowerPoint, but I've got a few slides. Thanks, Barry. And the idea is that. Hopefully there's a bit of a discussion at the end and see some of the challenges that you have, either from a personal point of view or within the organization. And I think it's a topic that is definitely not going away. I think in the past we've done a lot to support younger workers, and especially when we look at things like apprenticeships. But there's a growing workforce in the over 50s. And from the discussions we have with our members, there's lots of challenges that they're facing that I think there's a big opportunity for us to address and to see how we can better support. So I'm going to share with you some slides, which will be available afterwards. You can have access to those if you need. And as I say, if you've got any questions, drop them in chat or just come off mute and shout at me. I don't mind either way. So this is where we hope technology works. I'm going to share my screen. And if we're really lucky, hopefully you can all see some slides. No one's saying otherwise, so I take it that you can. So just a very quick background as to who Restless is and who we are and what we're doing. So we are effectively a digital community. We have about 800,000 members who are all over 50. And we started as an organization basically to support and inspire people over 50 with any change or things that they're going through in life. And one of the most significant areas that our members work with us on and approach us for is looking for work. So out of that 800,000, you've probably got 450 to 500,000 every month looking for new jobs or looking to change jobs or have come out of redundancy and looking for something different or a whole range of things. And within our site, we have lots of employers who work with us, including public sector, who are all looking for either specific roles to fill or just general roles, but they know that people with a bit more lived experience might be useful to them. So that's kind of where we are as an organization. We cover a whole range of things from jobs. We even have a dating site. As part of our offering, we have financial services. We have about 70,000 courses available to members. But really the general principle is that if you're over 50, there is something in there for you. And it doesn't really matter if you're slightly under 50, you can still join. Membership is completely free. So there's lots of really engaging content that people look at. So if we look at some of the statistics now that are being shown by ONS, etc., it says that about 25 million over 50s in the UK, which is a significant proportion. And they reckon that by 2030, that will get to about half the population will be over 50. And apparently we represent 80% of the wealth I turn 50 next year, and I don't think I represent a huge proportion of the wealth in the UK. But if you think about the demographic of somebody in their 50s, for example, or even in their late 40s, there's this huge group of people now that if you think if you're 50, you've still potentially got 17 years left at work. And you've got children at home, and you might have aging parents. So this is for all sort of sandwich generation where people are looking to make changes or to support, their families in the same way that they did when they were in their 30s and 40s. So there's some things that we can do as employers and as organizations to try and help some of this process. So if we look at our membership, for example, probably our core age of members is about 57, and just over 60% is female. And we cover the whole length and breadth of the British Isles. And we've done a lot of work recently in terms of press. So our CEO, Stuart, is often on the BBC and has been in various other discussions, because the topic of supporting over 50s is definitely a growing topic and a growing one of discussion. So we often get called on from a thought leadership point of view. I won't get into all of that, but that's everything that we do. So the bit that we're going to talk specifically about now is around work and career, and really just sharing some insights and thoughts from our members that hopefully will be helpful to you and hopefully raise a few questions. So some of the trends that we've seen, especially due to the pandemic and with our members who are looking for work, is we've found more and more that a rising group of people who are furloughed and then were effectively made redundant and have actually turned around and said, I don't want to go back to the lifestyle I had before. I maybe don't want to work as many hours. I don't want to commute anymore, so I'd like to work from home. I've got different commitments now in terms of either children at home or care for parents. And actually, I want to give something back. So I'm more interested in the social impact that I can offer and the experience that I can offer, rather than climbing up the career ladder and jumping on the rat race as they may have done before. So we see a lot of our members now that are looking for a complete range of roles. We still have people looking for senior exec roles, but we have a lot of people looking for a real mix of roles that fits in with their lifestyle and life goals, rather than just looking at salary, for example. We've seen a significant increase, for example, in the number of people looking for care jobs. And if you think in local authorities, there's a lot of social care positions that people are looking to fill. And I think part of that is because of challenges with Brexit. Part of that is because of challenges with COVID and people having jabs, not having jabs. And actually, a lot of our clients who are in the care sector have realised that there's this demographic that has potentially a lot of experience from life that could support different care roles. So we've seen a significant increase in the number of people looking at care roles, and especially in local authorities where they're looking to fill difficult social care roles. We've also seen an increase in things like customer service type jobs. It's quite interesting. One of our clients is Legal and General, and they have a whole customer service team that deals with pension clients. And typically they've employed people in their early 20s to support the customer service team. And they've realized that over the years, they've had various, not complaints, but comments from clients that the person on the other end of the phone didn't understand anything about having a pension in your late 50s, early 60s. So what they've done is a massive campaign to recruit people in the demographic of the people that they'll be talking to. So we did a big campaign with them specifically to look at people over 50, to talk on the phone to people who are over 50 about pensions. And the response has been excellent, but also from a customer service point of view and the end result from the person at the other end of the phone, they've been much, much happier. And I think there's a number of roles within different organizations where that story also fits. So we've seen, again, people looking at things like, can I work from 10 till 2? Because that fits around lifestyle. Can I work a 4-day week? Can I do a job share? So there's a lot more requests for flexibility around working hours and also location. So one of the the steps that we've seen employers starting to look at is to start thinking about their job postings and how they advertise those, and are they flexible in the approach? Does it offer people the opportunity for part-time work, flexible work? And if it does, is that in your face enough so that people realize it's available? Because we know that that's an area. We have a client that had a job advert out recently, had a huge response. They interviewed 25, 30 people, and nobody got offered a job. And they couldn't understand why and what the challenge was. And they realized that the job advert says willing to work 7 days a week. And when people got to the interview and they discussed this, they realized that the job was actually 7 days on, 2 days off. And lots of people said, well, I'm not interested in that. So now they've changed in the role to become you can do 3 days or you can do 4 days, and just changing the shift. So it's just a small thing. But if you think about the amount of work that goes into advertise the job, then do all the interviewing, and then meet people. And then if you're not meeting expectations, it just becomes a real kind of a painful process. So there's things that you can do within your organizations to look at the roles that you're posting and say, are we covering all the different aspects that could meet the audience that we're looking at? And the other thing that we find more and more as we talk to clients is this principle of multi-generational teams, and actually the benefits of having a mix in teams, regardless of job title. So again, just an anecdote or a simple story for you. My daughter is a supervisor at Amazon. She works in the distribution center. And there's a couple of teams within there. And in her team, she has 2 people in her team who are over 40, and then the rest all seem to be in their early 20s. And then there's another team where everyone's in their 20s. And it's often commented that her team seem to just get on and are quite, sounds terrible, but quite sensible at work. And they asked why, and they basically said, it feels like mum and dad's in my team, and I've got older people in my team, so I have to be a bit more respectful and a bit more sensible, which is an interesting anecdote. And I never thought I'd quite see that, because these people don't have a job title of manager or supervisor or anything else. It's just that the older workers felt like they should support the younger ones. The younger ones were grateful for the support, and everyone just kind of got on and worked together. And some of the younger teams had different challenges. Now, I think that's probably a stereotype that we don't want to have happen a lot. But I do think there are merits to having what we call lived experience in a team, but also having younger members of the team where you can have that diversity and opportunities to train and support, not just in the role, but in some life skills. And certainly our members enjoy doing that. They feel like they're giving back. And when we talk to people who are going for jobs, they like to move into a role where they feel like they're supporting and giving to the rest of their team. A lot of questions we get asked by people who are applying for jobs is around the application process. And we found, rightly or wrongly, the minute it starts to get a bit confusing, people would drop off. We had a client recently where, again, they were getting a lot of people into the top of the funnel looking at the job, starting the application process and then dropping off. And again, we did some research with them to understand why. And halfway through the application process, there was like a section where you had to download an app, and then you had to do some sort of gamification as part of the application process. And they realized that a significant majority of people were dropping off at that point because they either didn't feel they wanted to do it, wasn't relevant, etc. We've had other ones where the application process just hasn't been straightforward and simple. We had one recently where it was a fairly straightforward role, but it had a prerequisite that you had to be a graduate, which is quite common for a lot of different roles. But the person who was applying for it said, well, I graduated about 30 years ago. I can't really find all the past details, etc. But because they couldn't upload their proof of their degree, and they didn't go any further. We had another one where it asked for specific results in GCSEs. And the candidate said, well, I didn't do GCSEs, I did O-levels. but they had to upload something that was proof that they'd done these GCSEs. So again, these are quite simple things, but again, part of the process that I think, if it's not happening, can cause confusion. Communication is another area, and I would imagine this is the same across any role, regardless of demographic. People like to know whether they've got the job or not, and even if you don't give them all the information as to why they haven't got the job, just a simple email that says, thank you for applying, unfortunately on this occasion, that goes a long way. And we find a lot of people who are applying for roles just don't hear anything, and they find that quite disheartening, because then they sort of look inward and say, well, is it me? Is it the challenges? No one's responding to me. But I think there's some simple steps that we can take, and also giving feedback. If you do interview somebody that was quite good, but is missing in a couple of areas, some good feedback is always useful. And I don't think that's specific to the over 50s demographic. I think that's relevant to anybody. And again, I put respect there because, and again, it's a sensitive one. If you've got people who are interviewing candidates who are quite young and don't have experience of having interviewed somebody in their 50s or even in their 40s, etc., there are some basic skills and tips that you can give to people who are interviewing. I spoke with somebody just recently who was looking to fill a role, and their natural response was, well, this person, A, is going to try and take my job, B, is far too experienced and they're just going to get bored. So the interview just didn't go very well because they'd already had that sort of preconceived idea when they met the person. But actually, it transpired that the person that was applying for the role, if you looked at their CV, had very high experience. They'd been in a sort of a assistant chief exec type role. But actually, they now had a challenge where they were looking after a parent, and they had children, and just didn't have the time or inclination to have that kind of seniority and role anymore. Wanted to come in, use their experience, do a really good job, and actually learn a few new skills. But of course, when it came to interview stage, the natural response was, you're overqualified, you're going to get bored really quick, and not sure it's going to work. The person ended up getting the job, but it took a lot more discussion and I guess convincing that they weren't going to be bored and disappear in 2 minutes. So I think, again, from an interview point of view, there's some questions that I think are fair to ask around someone's lifestyle and where they're at in their own career, before sort of judging, well, why are you going for this role when your CV says you've done a lot more things? We also find that people are willing to learn. So there's been debates for a long time now about apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are applicable for any age, whether you're 21 or 51. And there's this sort of natural view that if you're in your 50s, you might not be interested in an apprenticeship because it just doesn't earn as much. But again, we found people that have paid off their mortgages, kids have left home, they just want to learn some new skills and try something different, even in later years. So again, I think opening up back to work skills programs, some of the funded programs that are available that a lot of you local authorities do an excellent job at, advertising those more and just being aware that people are willing to learn new skills. I've talked about it a little bit already, but the overqualified question seems to be the one that comes up the most. But I think that goes back to asking the right questions in an interview stage and not just assuming that from a CV that someone either did a bad job at a senior level, which is why they're now looking for a customer service role, or there's some other challenges and we just don't ask the questions because we just look at it from a CV point of view. I think we miss opportunities with that. And again, from a salary perspective, again, we see this a lot when we talk to our candidates, that life has changed. They don't need to earn the same salary that they had before because they've paid off more, kids have left home, whatever it might be, and the expectations are slightly different. So we often hear people say, actually, it's not about the salary, and I'm willing to take a small pay cut or even a significant pay cut because the job and the role and the organisation is of more interest to me than just bringing home the right salary. And just I won't read these out because I'll share the slides with you later. But I think one of the important things that we're seeing now is if you look at the statistic in the middle that says 6 in 10 people over 40 are now considering themselves digitally literate. If you think the last 2 years we haven't had a choice but to work on Zoom or Google Meet or Teams or whatever we've had to use, the level of, I think, digital literacy has increased. And this old adage that if you're over a certain age you can't use a laptop or a phone, I think is a wrong one. And I think there's a lot more skills than we give for credit for. And I think ageism is still a kind of area of discrimination that we miss, and we don't always understand that we're doing it, and we look at it from a younger age group and often forget the older demographic. And I'm a complete advocate for having a full range of age in the organization. Whilst I might be supporting people over 50 at the moment, I think it's important to have that rounded opportunity and to have those multi-generational teams. But I do think there are some things that are slightly different in this demographic that need to be taken into account. And the more that you can look at processes and applications and things that you're doing internally to say, well, if I was to apply for this job, or if I looked at this, would there be some challenges? So I'm conscious I've kind of thrown a lot of things at you and talked quite a bit. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and just ask if there's any sort of comments or questions or experiences that other people have had that are relevant to what I've shared so far.
Andrew, is it okay if I come in? I know it's like...
Yeah, please do.
So my mum is 77 and still works full-time in a school, and she was telling me just last night that she'd gone into the school office to ask for something. The school secretary had given her the thing she asked for, and one of the other teachers said, "Oh, that's nice, help the aged." So I'm gonna tell her about this presentation just on a very personal level, and because we were talking about how she was going to cope with it and how hurtful that was to her and how it was getting on her nerves. But it is just such an accepted form of discrimination against people. My question was about data. Is there any evidence around sort of the application to shortlist to appointment, or those types of things that we could use to demonstrate that perhaps unconscious bias in the workplace?
We've got some anecdotal evidence, and we're starting to gain more data on it. So we have some, but not significant amounts. There's certainly some things that I can share afterwards. The areas of data that we see are people in the top of the funnel looking for the job, then going through to application process, and then the drop off. And then we have kind of the when we take the time to analyze that, we can see why is the drop off. Is it because the application process wasn't right? Is it because interviewer didn't feel that the candidate was right because of X, Y, and Z? Was it that the interviewee didn't feel like it's an organization they want to work for because they had a bad experience? So there's a number of things that come out the back of it. But yeah, there isn't any kind of government sponsored data just yet, but we've got some anecdotal data that we get from our clients that I can look to put together and share for sure.
Very good, thank you. Or we could start developing our own data set, couldn't we? Sometimes you need that evidence in front of you to influence the conversation internally. Yeah,
because every local authority I know is recruiting somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, Sue and Andy. Just a question.
Hi,
how are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Great presentation already, so thanks for that, Andy. And by the greenness of my beard, I'm certainly significantly past 50, and even into 60 plus. So, and I've got to say, I do support the restless networking. I get your regular emails, so again, I find them really helpful. So I appreciate that and keep that going. My question is, you mentioned in terms of people 50 plus are willing to take a cut in wages or less money. question is about tax implications regarding pensions, because again, obviously, post 55, people can access pensions. Do you find that's a barrier at the minute in terms of the tax implications, in terms of having a pension, potentially putting over the threshold of tax, and therefore also wanting to work as well?
We do actually. And I think there's two parts of that. If you've got somebody that already works in public sector that's looking to move across in public sector, you often find that they've taken a pension with them from different organisations and don't really know how many they've got, where it's all amalgamated, and what the current status is. They just know it's quite good because they've worked for the public sector.
Yeah.
When they've worked in private sector, again, you find a slightly different conversation in that they probably had 4 or 5 pensions, don't really remember where they are, and they're trying to amalgamate them to find what the best option is. So actually you find it doesn't come up as a huge issue, mainly because people are not quite sure what pension they have or haven't got. If they're a bit more savvy, and not savvy, that's a bit unfair, but if they have studied their pension and know exactly what it's all about, then yes, it comes up as a slightly bigger issue. But generally speaking, we find that a lot of people they know they've got a pension somewhere. They know that money gets taken off them every month, but not necessarily sure. And it's not till we get to sort of later 60s that people are saying, I should probably pay attention now and have a look. We've just actually put out, if you saw our latest newsletter that went out today or yesterday, there's a section in there about understanding public sector pensions.
I've had a look at it already, Andy. Thank you.
And we did that. And we did that specifically because we get lots of questions from people in the public sector saying, I'm not quite sure what the implications are. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but it doesn't come up as a huge issue if people are changing salary levels.
Great, thank you.
Andy, there's a question in the chat from June. June, do you want to come on and ask the group, or do you want me to read this out? Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Thanks. It was just really that, and we do a lot of work around the menopause. We've got a menopause network, and we've been trying to do a lot of things. And obviously, it's a lot of our members are 50 plus, either late 40s or maybe in the 50s. And it was interesting to come up about the pension as well, because that's been something talked about quite a lot lately, about women either leaving work altogether or dropping to lower paid jobs because they're not getting the support they need, and then that affects their pension and things. So it's just obviously there's a big chunk of women in that group of the over 50 then. Yeah.
So if I cover the menopause one first, we actually partner with an organisation called the Menopause Centre. So we've run a number of webinars that are available on site, so you can have a look at them afterwards. But we know that it's a challenge for a lot of people in our demographic, and we know that from a work experience, there's just a complete lack of knowledge in some areas that just people aren't supported very well. And there are sort of silly comments that are made and detrimental comments made. And I think there's an education piece that needs to happen, that people need to understand that. For me, we've taken a lot of effort to understand mental health, for example, and mental well-being. For me, when we look at people experiencing menopause, managers need to understand better and have a better education about what that actually physically means to their workforce, and that people aren't just taking time off because they've got a hot flush. There's far more serious implications and far more going on. So I think there's a lot more that we can do in terms of supplying and helping employers with that support training, even if it's just standard training that goes to managers. So we're looking at that at the moment, and it's definitely an area that we want to look at more.
Excellent.
And the pension question is similar. We find that people are having to drop to part-time hours to fit in with family needs, and what's the impact of that? So again, our pension advice team did a lot of questions on that.
That's a really interesting point,
Thanks,
June.
Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, June.
We are just on past, Andy. So is there any other last minute questions?
I think Maureen's got her hand up, I think. Sue?
Yes, I have.
Thanks, Barry.
Cheers.
Okay. Like Barry, I'm also a baby boomer. And the issue is, yes, being in that 60+ age group, where somebody like me who has not only public sector pensions, I've also got private sector pensions. And, you know, I was able to access one of my pensions at age 60. So when I made the decision during the lockdown that I actually wanted to go back to work because I was in danger of becoming isolated, I made a decision I would go back into a role that was, should we say, much more junior than I would normally have worked in, because I knew exactly what the tax implications were at that stage. But the difficulties of that in terms of going back into a role or going for a role that's probably more junior than you're used to working in, is how that is treated normally by the people that have recruited you and some of the people you work with, because of course everything is out there on LinkedIn. And if they see that you're somebody who's been in that more senior post, people start to ask questions. Well, why are you here?
Yep. Did you get to know?
I usually respond by saying, because I want to work, because I feel in terms of my own legacy, I have something I can contribute to my profession. But you're also filled with a certain amount of suspicion and at times real disrespect. So, you know,
yeah,
I'm telling you my lived experience.
That's super useful. Thank you, Maureen. And I don't think that's unique, sadly. The fortunate thing you've had is you got past the stage that got you a job. Lots of people don't get past that stage because the stigma happens before they've actually had the opportunity to explain their story and get through the door, as it were. So I think there's a work to be done in terms of, as an individual, to be honest about why you're changing roles, and as an organization to accept that somebody wants to make some life changes.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean you always have to move up the ladder to make a life change. So I think there's some definite discussion there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, as you say, it's not always about the money.
No.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Andy. It was really, really interesting subject area. And thanks, Barry, Maureen, and I think has dropped off now, but thank you for your contributions. These half-hour sessions on a Friday are a regular occurrence. If you're a corporate member of PPMA, you can access this video and send it on to your colleagues. It'd be a really interesting, 30-minute discussion in a team meeting, and then a debate about it in your area. I think would be potentially really useful. I've been told, so next Friday, we go from one extreme to another, is Generation Alpha, how to appeal to a younger audience. And that's being hosted by Penna. So if you can spare half an hour, or you think one of your colleagues might be interested in that session next Friday at 12 noon, you would be very welcome. But just finally, Andy, really, really interesting and thought-provoking session. So thank you to Restless for supporting us and for your time this afternoon.
My pleasure.